Go for it.
On pages C1 through C3.
Did you have a standing question?
On pages C1 through C3. Oh, I'm sorry, I was going to mark this as an exhibit. Can we mark this as exhibit 6? Pages C1, C2, and C3. What is that document? So the bank statement.
Well, I'm trying to be a bit more precise, but it looks
Yeah.
like the initial thing, so.
Okay. Is that something that you have seen previously?
Yes.
And in the bank statement on C2, the first check, 100. First check number, 100. Dated 10/13. What is the amount of that check?
$615,000.
And who is that check to?
To Life Dash.
To Life Dash, and that's on page C4. They have a photocopy of the check.
Yes.
And who signed that check?
Jennifer Lux.
And what was her position in LifeSync?
She was principal.
What is that check for? I mean, I know it's made out for $615,000, but why would a check that large be written to Life Dash?
To initiate product development.
And other than that, there are only 2 other checks that were written in that statement. And looks like 2 debit card purchases. How did you verify that the $615,000 check was being used for a valid purpose under the grant?
I didn't.
Okay. On page C6 through, I'm sorry, C5 through C7, do you recognize that document?
Yes.
And what is that one?
This would have been the bank statement for the second month.
Okay. Does it have on C8 a photocopy of the checks attached to it?
Yes.
Is this something that you had reviewed previously?
Yes.
Checks number 104 and 105 are for the same amount. One to James Grant and one to Jennifer Lux. In the amount of $2,916.67. Do you know what those were written for?
They were disbursements for them to be paid.
As salaries or some other kind of disbursement?
Salaries.
And check number 109 is to Anchor Consulting.
Yes.
What is Anchor Consulting?
That is the consulting firm owned by Jason Broder.
And what type of consulting does the Jason Broder Anchor Consulting do?
I don't know.
And the pay periods for James Grant and Jennifer Lux, how often do they get paid? How much do they get paid each pay period?
Generally around $2,916.
Is that every 2 weeks or every month?
Well, I do not know if they were on a bi-monthly or every 2-week period. We can do math.
If you look at check number 110 and check number 126, they're both to Jennifer Lux. And one from 1114 and one from 1128 for the same amount. So would that indicate that it's likely there's 2-week pay periods?
Yes.
So that would be roughly $6,000 a month in salary? Is that correct?
That's close, yes.
And then pages C10 through C12, do you recognize, I'm sorry, C9 through C12, do you recognize that document?
Yes.
Is that something you reviewed?
Yes.
Do you remember where you reviewed these documents? Would this be in your truck again?
Generally, yes.
C13 through C16. Recognize that document?
Yes.
What is that document?
This is the January bank statement.
Is that something you reviewed before?
Yes.
And are these checks for salaries and consulting, similar to the last statements?
Yes.
C17 through C20. Do you recognize that document?
Yes.
And what is that one?
February
Of 2012.
2012.
And is that a document you reviewed previously?
Yes.
Why is there a check 1011? And check 1012 are written the same day, February 1st, to both to Life Dash. Why were 2 checks written to them?
I don't recall.
And do those 2 checks total approximately $500,000?
Yes.
So between October 13th of 2011 and February 1st, 2012, Life Sync wrote checks to Life Dash for over $1 million. If you add it together, checks 10, 11, 10, 12, and check 100, that would be over $1 million.
Yes.
Okay. And who owns Life Dash Inc.? Do you have an understanding? Do you know who owns Life Dash Inc.?
It's my understanding that Travis Bond owns Life Dash.
And check number 1016, who is that check to? It's on page C20, sorry.
Travis Bond.
Okay, does that say it's consulting November through January?
Yes, it does.
And that's for $12,500?
Yes.
Do you have any idea why we pay a consulting fee to Travis Bond separate from the checks to Life Dash Inc.?
No.
Pages C21 through C24. Is that a document that you looked at before?
Yes.
And is that the March 2012 statement?
Yes.
And check number 135 in the amount of $20,000 to, who's that to?
It is to John Grant III.
Is that the same grant that you were talking about earlier?
No.
And is he related to that grant? James
Yes.
Grant and John Grant?
Yes.
And how are they related?
He is an attorney, also, and a brother.
Okay. And that's for legal consulting? It says in the memo section, correct?
Yes. Pretty cheap, isn't it?
Do you know if that was for a retainer or for work completed, or do you have any idea?
I had a conversation with Mr. Grant, with James Grant, about this, and trying to recollect the nature of the work. I can't remember with specificity.
Okay. On check 1025 to Gabriel Falbo, it says it's for invoice number 1. Do you remember seeing an invoice that check was paid for? Is there something-
1028, I think you said check number 1025.
The numbers are on top. Let's see. Oh yeah, it's 1020. I'm sorry, I was reading the top. It's on the bottom. 1028 for 157900 to Gabriel Falbo for an invoice. Did you also check invoices as well as checks and bank statements?
No.
Okay. C25 through C29. Did you review that document before?
Yes.
Is this one of the documents you reviewed in your truck?
Yes.
And check 1044 for the amount of $430,298 even. Is that to Life Dash again?
Yes.
And check number 1046 for $19,404.65. Is that also to Life Dash?
I can't read it, but I believe it's 19. Yes.
Okay. I notice there's some checks here, 1036 and 1037, 1038, 1039, made out to someone, Tony Pazalia. Do you know that person or why checks were made to him?
New employee.
Do you know what his position was or what he did for employment there?
Not precisely, no.
You know him precisely?
I do.
What's your understanding of it?
He went to work for the project.
Did he do like, do you know whether he did like software or he did like office setups or?
I don't know.
Okay. C30 through C33. Is that document you viewed before?
Yes.
Is that the May statement and checks?
Yes.
Is there a check here, 1032 for $160 to James Grant?
Yes.
Is that for a cell phone? In the memo section, February, March cell phone?
That's what the memo says. Yes.
Did you ever see any checks where James Grant was getting any kind of salary?
Yes.
Okay.
Thought we had established that.
I'm sorry. We talked before about someone named John Grant. Is that different than this James Grant?
Yes.
So this is James Grant, right?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go to page C34 through C37. Is that a document you've seen before?
Yes.
And is that the June 2012 statement?
Yes.
Does that include a check number 1061 for $329,895 to Life Dash?
Yes.
And the memo says, it looks to me, SOW invoice 200-31. Is that invoice something you looked at?
No.
Do you know what the acronym SOW means?
Statement of work. At least that's what we use it as.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Page C38 through C41, did you review that June 2012 statement and checks?
Yes.
And check number 1067. Jordan something, what's the last name on that? Do you recognize that?
Yes, he's been there for several months. Jordan Rayner was another employee.
Okay.
I say employee, consultant, excuse me.
Okay. And C42 through C45, do you recognize that August 2012 statement and checks? That's something you reviewed previously. sorry, you're still looking at it? Is this something you reviewed previously?
Yes.
And there's check 1077 is to Bond Medical IT.
Yes.
Is that another company owned by Travis Bond?
I presume so. I do not know.
Page C46 through C49. Did you review that September 2012 statement and checks previously?
No, I didn't.
And why didn't you review this particular set?
Because the project was closed out, and it was, my review was in the closeout.
What do you mean the
I did
project
not
was
see the
closed out?
September, I never saw the September statement.
Okay. And explain to me what you mean when you say closed out.
Well, not closed out, it was assumed by Continuum.
So that's when Continuum took over under the November 2012. Let's see here. Okay, so now under the November 2012 agreement with Continuum, there's a section 4.8 that's in Exhibit 5. It looks like it specifies with greater specificity the records to be provided for review, correct?
Yes.
Did you no longer review the Continuum labs? You said someone else in your office began reviewing or being project administrator for the
Yes.
IDA?
Yes.
So that's why you haven't reviewed the September.
That is correct.
Do you know whether the person in your office, who was it again?
It's my understanding it has been reconciled, but I do not know the circumstances of reconciliation in this instance.
Okay, that was Casey Dixon?
Yes.
Okay. So she began to review the statements beginning in September 2012, or is that what you were saying? Which is the last one you reviewed?
August. I never saw the September statement.
Okay, so you
I discussed it, but I never saw it.
So you reviewed C42 through C45, the August statement, and then at that point, Casey Dixon started reviewing these statements.
Yes.
And you may have discussed them, but she is the one that would have viewed them.
Yes.
Do you know whether she viewed them?
I do not.
On page C51, there's a Blue Water Project progress report. And that's dated in 2011. Reporting period 10/24/11 to 10/31/11. Is that a document that you reviewed?
Yes.
And where would you have reviewed that document?
With the bank statements in my vehicle. You take these documents, divide them by 6, they're not that complex.
Okay, so now we're just moving into a different type of document,
Yes.
it looks like, right? And so this was provided with the statement and the
Yes.
checks, you'd also get this progress report template?
That is correct.
Okay. Why was that, do you have any idea why between WP6 and WP7 there's a redaction? This is blacked out. Was it that way when we reviewed it before? Was it just because it's being copied? Is that why it comes out black?
What is your reference, WP?
I'm sorry.
What page are you on?
I'm sorry, C51, there's a big black rectangle and a smaller black rectangle.
I do not recall the reason for the redaction.
Do you know what was redacted when you viewed it?
I do not recall.
Okay. And the next progress reports, the progress report is on a couple pages, C53 through C55. November of 2011, did you also review that progress report?
Yes.
Did you do any independent verification other than reading the progress reports about the information that's listed in the progress report on operations, marketing, project design, other than reading what was written here?
And discussions, nothing outside of that.
Okay. In the discussions, would you ask the questions, or would someone explain things further to you on their own accord? Do you remember the variation of that, or a mixture? Was there any set kind of way that you did the inquiry or discussion?
No.
C55 through C56. You reviewed this December 2011 progress report.
I did, but I don't think I reviewed this one until probably the end of January. Not that it matters, but
Okay.
yes, I have seen these progress reports.
And is that because of the holidays, or were you traveling, or is there a delay in giving you the reports? Do you remember? Why?
We did have some periods of time where there were some delays. Don't recollect exactly why, but
So, this December progress report has a reporting period from 12/1/2011 to 12/31/2011, but it was updated on 12/5/2011. But you said you didn't get it until January?
as I recollect, yes.
Okay. And do you remember the redactions on page C56?
I do not recall whether these documents were redacted or not. I don't.
Okay. Page C57 and C58, January 2012 progress report. Did you review that document?
Yes.
And this was updated on February 1st, 2012. Do you remember offhand when you might have reviewed that? Would that have been in February or the last day of January? Did you have some set period of time?
I really
ago?
do not recall.
Okay. Did you have a set meeting set up to monthly review things?
No.
Okay. On page C59 and C60, is that a document that you had previously reviewed?
Yes.
That's the February 2012 report.
Yes.
And C61 through C62, the March 2012 report, did you review that one also?
Yes.
C63 and C64, did you review that document previously?
Yes.
C65 and C66, May 2012, did you review that one previously?
Yes.
C67, C68, the June 2012, did you review that report previously?
Yes.
C69 through C70 and 71, a three-page report for July 2012, did you review that?
Yes.
C72 through C73, the August 2012 report, did you review that one?
do not think I reviewed the August report. I think it was
Okay. I noticed on
August
page,
or September. I don't think I saw those last two.
okay, would that have been Casey Dixon that would have reviewed
They
those?
would have been
reports?
included in, I don't know whether Casey saw any of this or not.
Okay. On page C, 73, talks about a launch for friends and family.
Pardon?
In section 8, talks about doing a launch for friends and family.
Page 73.
Yeah, need list of emails for friends and family launch.
Yes.
The use of the Blue Water software that you tried with your wife, is that as part of the friends and family launch?
No.
Okay. Were you part of the friends and family launch?
No.
It's 12, almost 12:30. Do you want to break for lunch? When we come back, how long do you guys want? Whenever you're ready. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. Were you shown any confidential information regarding LifeSync?
Define confidential.
That was kind of my next question. Were you shown any documents that LifeSync claimed were confidential?
I think that I was shown documents that are considered proprietary business information.
Okay. And what types of documents, what's your understanding of what is proprietary business information?
Whatever they want to declare as such.
So I could just declare anything and that would be proprietary business information?
I think you could.
Okay. And what was the nature of the information that LifeSync declared to be proprietary business
The
information?
development of their product, the manner in which they were doing it, who they were paid to do it with.
Okay, let's take those one at a time. The manner of development of their product, what does that entail?
The
What does it mean?
application of the platform, the software development, the targeted market.
Okay. Did you discuss with them what your process was for addressing proprietary business information? Or how did you handle proprietary business information?
They had made it clear from day one that we would operate under a non-disclosure circumstance.
Okay, so did you sign a non-disclosure agreement?
We had non-disclosure agreement. I don't recall today whether we have a written NDA, but it was clearly understood that the circumstances under which we were operating was confidential.
Okay, so and did that mean that you weren't allowed to go and tell anyone else what you had heard from them? Is that what that means?
Well, they were the presenters of what was presented.
Okay, and then they just took it with them, they didn't leave it with you because it was confidential?
That is correct.
Okay. What is your understanding of statutory confidentiality of corporate or proprietary
Ralph, I'm
business?
going to object. That kind of calls for, I know you have to use the word understanding, but it kind of calls for a legal opinion.
Okay.
I'll join in the objection.
Okay. Are you aware of any Florida statutes that talk about confidential information in economic development projects?
Okay.
And what's your basic understanding of that statute?
trying to understand what you mean by that question.
Have you received confidentiality requests from other companies that are located in Hardin County?
I do, sometimes, yes.
And do you receive
In
those?
various forms.
Okay. Did you ever receive a written request?
I have.
Did you receive a written request from LifeSync?
We did.
Is that this document here?
It is.
Okay, if we could mark that one, this is our next exhibit. I think we're maybe at 7.
7.
And does this request cite to a specific statute?
Two 88.075.
Okay. And is it your intent to honor confidentiality agreements during the confidentiality term, but then allow information to be distributed to the public?
Absolutely.
Please tell me about, you said that marketing, target marketing area was proprietary business information. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, any business should have a right to be proprietary and confidential with respect to their product, its development, and the way it's deployed in the marketplace. We do live in a very competitive economic circumstance in this country, and that's it.
So, for example, with this LifeSync, they're preparing software to record and store medical records and information. But whether they're marketing that to elderly people or young people or patients of hospitals, would you consider that to be proprietary business information?
Yes, I would. I would consider anything they consider to be proprietary business information.
Is that why you took documents to your truck to review it there to preserve confidentiality?
Concern about the definition or conflict between 119.07 and 288.075, yes.
So was it your intent that by reading it in your truck that it would not become a 119 public record? Was that what you were trying to do?
I felt more comfortable. I think had I taken possession of the records, had I viewed them in my office, I think that it would have potentially compromised me in my ability to recognize their rights under 288.075.
But as long as you read the records in your truck, you felt they were protected under 288.075?
Maybe.
Which specific records were to be considered confidential under the confidentiality request Exhibit 7? How could you tell which records were and which ones weren't?
They would control the authorization for records to be released. It's entirely their prerogative, as I read and understand the law.
Okay, so if they showed something to you that was released, or how would that work in terms of practice?
They would release it.
And who would they release it to?
If I had it, if I had possessed it, I would release it, unless it was under a written 288.075 circumstance. Then I wouldn't release it until it had not been extended or expired. And I may not release it regardless.
Did you consider information that was in the public records request, Exhibit 1 and Exhibit 2, to include confidential documents or information?
You're talking about the contract for LifeSync and Continuum? I don't recall it.
Exhibit 1 and Exhibit 2 are my public records requests. They're the subject of the case.
No, those would be public records.
Okay. Did you, in your files at your office, separate confidential information from non-confidential information regarding LifeSync?
I think I have stated, and I continue to state, that I did not possess any documents that were confidential in my office.
Did you have any email correspondence with any of the principals of LifeSync?
We have provided email correspondence that
Is there anything in those emails that is
I have not
confidential?
reviewed them.
So as we sit today, you're not sure whether there's anything confidential that should not
I'm
be released
relying
in there?
on the person who has been delegated public record responsibility to produce this.
Okay, so as far as you know, there's no confidential information?
I have not reviewed it.
Okay, but the person who does that for you, Christie,
Yes.
she's reviewed it and she's determined that there's no confidential?
I can't answer for her.
Okay.
I certainly hope that's the case.
Okay. Did you also bring your phone records?
I did.
And you didn't have time to segregate your personal phone?
I don't have a capability to do that.
Okay. And also, did you bring your calendars?
I have the calendars that were produced by Christie.
And were those calendars just the meetings about LifeSync?
No, well, I don't know. I haven't looked at them.
It looked like they were just pages about LifeSync. If there was a LifeSync page, it might have been copied.
They would have been, but they would have only been those circumstances that were placed on a calendar.
Okay. Do you know if there's any time limits in Florida statutes, 288.075, with regard to confidential information?
There are under certain circumstances.
Was any confidential information about additional owners or investors in LifeSync ever revealed to you? You haven't shared about investors?
No.
Does your office have a form that's used for confidentiality requests, or do you simply get them from the applicants?
We have a form.
Did LifeSync ever fill out that form?
I don't recall.
Did you ever discuss the confidentiality under 288.075 with James Grant?
Well, non-disclosure, yes. 288.075 in the context of non-disclosure, yes.
And what were those conversations about?
I don't recall. General
Were the
conversation.
percentages of ownership ever revealed to you, or was that going to be confidential?
I don't recall if they were.
Don't recall if they were ever mentioned to you. Okay. And this letter is from James grant and it's dated July 14th, 2012. Was ever a letter before July 14th, 2012?
Certainly conversations, I do not know.
And did you have any part in drafting this letter? Or did they draft it and send it to you? Sometimes people will say, here's a letter you
What do
need.
you mean by drafting?
You didn't draft this letter for James
No.
Grant? Okay, you just received it from him?
Yes.
Okay. Has Continuum Labs ever submitted a written 288.075 confidentiality request?
I believe they have. I operate as if they have.
This letter dated July 14, 2012, doesn't specifically say that marketing information or any other specific information is confidential, does it? Does it explain what would be considered confidential and what would not be confidential?
Well, proprietary information,
Okay.
it is defined in the statute.
So, on these checks that you reviewed and statements, would you say it's true that the vast majority of the money that was provided under the grant was then paid out to Life Dash?
Yes.
And did you have any way of finding out how Life Dash was spending the money once it was given to them?
No.
So the extent of your capability to review any monies ended at Life Sync. You did not go further into the consulting firms,
That is correct.
including Life Dash.
That is correct.
Have you reviewed any other records besides the statements and the checks of LifeSync? You said you hadn't reviewed any of the underlying invoices. Have you reviewed anything else?
In the context of being, no, in the context of being confidential, we have received information from them in meetings that I have looked at. And,
What information?
well, they've made presentations.
Okay. But have you reviewed any documentation regarding expenses, including receipts? Any receipts?
No.
Cancel checks you did, correct?
Yes.
And basis for disbursement? Anything other than the statements
No.
and the checks? And no invoices, correct?
No.
And you said they made meetings, they made presentations at meetings, is that to the IDA meetings?
Yes.
Did you ever review the gross salaries of LifeSync employees, or just surmise them by the checks that were written to them?
The checks.
Did you see any checks for rent or for lease or space? Anything for furniture or equipment?
I don't recall.
Anything for utilities, like electric bill or water bill? Typically, the bill is I pay
For
at my
who, though?
home for LifeSync.
I
Have you seen cancel
recall.
checks to the electric company or to the water company?
No.
Did you ever review a business plan for LifeSync as part of the application or grant?
Directly called a business plan. No.
How did you verify the creation of new jobs or employees with regard to the LifeSync grant?
Repeat that.
Do you know how many jobs the LifeSync grant has created?
I don't recall. This would be like a year ago. I'm not certain.
A year ago, you didn't know how many jobs were created? Is that from the reports they were giving to the IDA?
You asked me a question in the current. How many has LifeSync created?
Okay.
LifeSync.
Let me re-ask it. Did you know at any time how many jobs were being created by LifeSync? Was it part of their reports? Or did you look at any documents to show another employee had been hired?
Yeah.
Were a specific number of jobs promised as part of the grant application?
Yes, but I do not recollect the number.
Okay. You said that you did not evaluate the grant applications personally, but did anyone in your office evaluate the grant applications?
No. I'm not aware of that.
Did you ask the IDA board for a confidentiality agreement with LifeSync during their presentations orally?
I don't understand that question.
I'm sorry, did LifeSync ask the board that any information in their presentations be kept confidential?
I do not know.
As the executive director to the IDA, who is your primary contact on the IDA board? Did you meet with all board members before meetings, or any particular board members, or the chair?
Generally the chair of either the EDC or the IDA.
Who was the chair at the time when LifeSync was being reviewed? Was that Joe Albrecht?
The chair of the IDA at the time, what do you mean reviewed? By the board?
When the
during
application was being considered for the grant agreement.
You know, I believe his name, I believe it was Marcus Shackelford. And the day that Mr. Shackelford's term expired or he resigned, Rick Justice chaired one meeting, but I'm trying to understand what review is. There was a change in the chair at the time of the grant award meeting.
Was that the September 22nd meeting?
Without checking the dates, I'll agree with that.
After the grant award, how long did it take to write the grant agreement, or was it already prepared? ready for signature at the grant award?
September 22nd, or whatever the
Oh,
date is.
October 11th, okay. So was this written up after the meeting?
Yes.
And did you write this, or did LifeSync write this?
Myself, Ken Evers, James Grant wrote it.
Okay, and is that something you did by sending emails back and forth, or meeting in a room?
We
and
met
drafting
and
it?
drafted it,
Okay.
then presented it to the board.
And was it your input, the deliverables on the grant agreement? Or the deliverables come from LifeSync?
I don't recall who initiated deliverables.
Okay. And did Joe Albrin help draft this agreement? You said James Grant did. From your side, it was just you and the attorney, no one from the board itself?
I don't think Joe Albert was involved in that.
Okay.
He certainly may have been involved in communication, but I don't recall whether he was there when we drafted the agreement.
Did you use another economic development agreement as a model to begin drafting this one? Or did you start from scratch?
Pretty much from scratch.
And have you heard the term clawback with regard to economic development agreements?
For clawback with economic development agreements, I have.
Okay. And was there a personal note that was signed on part of the grant?
Yes.
And who signed the personal note?
There
Is it
I'm not certain these are the notes.
Okay, I'm not sure there either. Did Joe Albrin sign one of the personal guarantees?
He did.
James Grant?
He did.
And Travis Bond?
I don't believe Mr. Bond signed
Okay. Is your belief that James Grant and Joe Albrin have the wherewithal to guarantee the over $2 million?
I don't know that that was in my purview to have a belief or not.
Okay. Did you investigate whether there had resources to back up the note?
No.
And under what circumstances would the note be called or the money be clawed back? Does the grant agreement tell you when the money would be due?
There are circumstances in the grant that describe conditions for recall.
Could you find those for me?
We can go off the record for a second.
Yeah. Page 11, Exhibit B, Performance-Based Note, Section 1.
Yes.
I guess it's if the business fails to substantially comply with the scope and purpose of this agreement. How would you determine whether it failed to substantially comply?
Failure.
Which would be measured? Is it a measurable thing, a numerical measurement?
Well, failure due to misappropriation, misfeasance, malfeasance.
Okay, but it doesn't say that in this section, does it?
Well,
failed to substantially comply with the scope and purpose of the agreement, fails to act in good faith to fulfill the stated goals of this agreement, or use funds in a manner patently inconsistent with the objectives of this agreement. Are those subjective terms, do you think? You don't have any specific number of jobs that had to be created or specific return on investment that was measurable, do you?
Not relative to this particular section, but there are some other performance criteria.
Okay, and how would you know if money was misappropriated?
I wouldn't know at this point.
How would you know in implementing this by going through the canceled checks and statements whether money had been misappropriated?
I wouldn't.
Okay.
Now, remind you,
And
we're
what-
at the end of year one.
Okay. And the personal notes, are those notes that you requested certain people provide, or did they volunteer to provide those? Why did Joe Albritton sign a personal note?
Well, it was part of our agreement.
Okay, and is that something that you asked him to do?
I don't recall, through the development of the document, we agreed that they should sign notes relative to their liability.
Okay. So if there were a misappropriation, it's your understanding that either James Grant or Joe Albritton or Suzanne Lux would be guaranteeing repayment of the money that was misappropriated.
Suzanne, look.
I think she signed Jennifer Lux. Jennifer E. Lux.
Yes.
Okay. Have you ever had to recall any monies for misappropriation on any of the grants that you've awarded?
That's it. Unless there was a second one, but no.
Okay. Have you heard about other counties recalling money that's been awarded for economic development if the business didn't live up to the grant?
I'm not aware of any other counties that have circumstances like Hardin County, but the answer is no.
Are you a member of any like economic development associations or professional organizations?
I have been, yes.
And what are those?
There is a Florida Economic Development Council.
Okay, were you a member of that for all?
I am, yes.
Okay. Is that something, is that a place that offers seminars and CLE or continuing education things like attorneys might go to?
They don't offer that, but they do have those seminars.
Okay. Did you feel any pressure with regard to drafting the grant agreement because you were the executive director to the IDA and the chairman of the IDA was the recipient of the grant?
The chairman of the IDA wasn't the recipient of the grant.
I'm sorry, chairman of the EDC was the recipient of the grant?
Why would I feel pressure?
Okay, so you didn't feel any pressure?
No.
Do you think it was unusual there were 3 state legislators that were involved in LiveSync?
I thought it was great.
Is that something that you suggested or something that just happened?
It just happened.
And why did you think it was great?
Just, I don't know. I just think that people that are in positions of prominence have more to lose, so the pressure to perform is going to be greater. It's a layer and a measure of security.
Were you the primary person responsible for overseeing the grant funds at LiveSync?
I was responsible for making sure that the draw schedule was dispersed according to the will of the board.
And that the money, expenditures by LifeSync were documented in the check statements and checks?
And I had the prerogative to review them. There was no compulsory position to document them.
Okay. When was the first draw sent to LifeSync? Would that have been October 17th?
Whatever the date of that first check was. Actually, that's not correct. I'd have to look at the date of the IDA's disbursement. I don't know if it corresponds with their dates or not.
Okay. And the IDA disbursements, were they made by check or by wire transfer or money orders?
I think initially they were made by some type of transfer. I don't recall. Maybe a cashier's check. I don't recall.
Is there a reason why the application and the any business plan wasn't attached to the grant award agreement?
No.
Do you know whether the deliverables as presented to the board were included in the grant agreement?
I don't recall.
Was a specific number of jobs presented to the board as a minimum number of jobs as part of the grant application?
I believe so, but I don't recall.
But it was not included in the grant agreement, correct?
I don't recall.
In the grant agreement that you initially drafted or you were drafting or negotiating, did you ask for a specific number of jobs or measurable deliverables at any point during the negotiation of it?
I don't recall.
Do you have draft copies of it where you may have gone back and forth
I
and
do not.
changes? Does your office have that?
I do not know.
The project description to bring a web-based solution to market and establish a customer service presence in Hardy County. Was that your terminology or was that terminology that was proposed by LifeSync?
Jointly agreed upon.
I think that's a very general statement.
I think so.
Is there a reason why it was so general?
Is there a reason it should have been specific?
Is it limited to some kind of healthcare software? Could be any web-based solution, correct?
Certainly.
Is there any specific timeline or requirement to do anything actually in Hardy County in the grant agreement?
Initially there was, but in the grant. I don't think so.
In the grant application, was there initially?
Am I looking for at this point?
Any timeline or requirement to do anything specifically in Hardy County geographically?
At least I don't see it.
Did LifeSync request approval to sell to continue on?
Recall.
Does LifeSync ever return any of the money that was given to them under the grant agreement?
Not aware of any being returned.
So as you were drafting this agreement and the obligations of the business to provide records and the obligation of the IDA to review the records, and you were the project administrator for a period of time initially, at the time you wrote this, was it your intention that you would have people deliver records to your truck and you would review them in your truck and that would fulfill these obligations? When you were drafting this, did you think that you were going to be reviewing this in your truck, or did that come up later?
Can't report it.
That's because you were concerned about the confidentiality issues you talked about.
Yes.
So when you have the reports from LifeSync to the EDC, EDA, or IDI, do you record those meetings to make audio tapes of the presentations to the board?
Yes.
Do you retain those audio tapes?
Yes.
Did you ever visit the Wesley Chapel office?
Yes.
Did you ever visit the Tampa office?
No, I'm aware of the camp office.
Have you ever visited the offices of LifeDash as opposed to LifeSync?
I don't know.
So, are you responsible for the stewardship of the grant money that has been awarded to LifeSync?
Yes.
In the checks, statements, and checks that you reviewed, did you see that LifeSync had purchased any capital improvements like a building or land, or capital facilities?
No.
Did you see any checks for purchases of computers or servers or computer hardware?
No.
Do you know if there's any assets that were purchased, physical assets with the grant money that was provided to LifeSync?
No.
Did you ever see the reverse sides of the checks to see who may have signed the back of the check for deposit?
I may have.
Did you see any on the back of the check where Life Dash may have transferred the check over to someone else, signed the check for deposit in a different account?
I don't recall. Right.
See any checks like that? That weren't deposited by the recipient on the front of the check?
Not that I can recall.
How many times did you go to the Wesley Chapel office?
I believe twice.
Did you actually go inside, or did you stay in your truck when you went to Wesley Chapel?
I did go inside.
And what period of time would that have been? Would that have been during the application or after the grant was awarded?
It would have been early in the program. I did not go back after probably December.
Okay. And was this the LifeSync office? That you went in this, early December, you went into the LifeSync office?
I don't recall what the office is named, honestly. Neither do I know this way the businesses are segregated in an office.
Okay. You don't remember if they had like a sign on the door or a sign on it? And did you see people working when you went there?
Yes.
And do they work at desks or computers? Or what does it look like? Can you describe it?
Just a normal office setting.
And is it an open office with carrels, or is it rooms that are?
There's
enclosed?
multiple rooms.
And do you have an idea of maybe how many people were working there?
I do not.
Was it 6 or maybe 60?
I do
100?
I do not.
Currently, is Casey Dixon solely responsible for managing the continuing contract? Continuing grant?
I don't really know what you mean by solely.
I think you said that Casey Dixon was the project administrator, program project administrator for the continuum, is that correct? And do you review her work?
I do.
Okay.
As does the whole IDA board.
Okay. And is Casey Dixon the daughter of an IDA board member?
She is.
And does he recuse himself from issues or reports that involve her presentations?
I don't know that a circumstance has come up where that was necessary.
And you said earlier she's an employee of the Chamber of Commerce? Okay. And is there some kind of agreement between the IDA and the Chamber of Commerce for her review of the project?
I don't think so.
Is that an informal thing that just happened?
I think she has permission from the chamber to do contract work or project management work for the IDA.
So the IDA has a contract with the chamber or a contract with Casey individually?
We treat Casey as a contracted employee.
Of the IDA? Or
You know, I'm not
EDC?
certain whichever it is, one or the other, or both.
And her paychecks, did she get a separate check for the work she does for the IDA, or is it just a Chamber of Commerce check that goes to
She
her?
gets a separate check for the work that she does for the IDA. Or EDC, whichever it is. I believe it's the IDA.
Has she been, do you instruct her what to look at or what not to look at when you're administering the continuum grant?
She uses the contract.
Has there been a report on the revenue generation by Continuum Labs? You said that they are up and running now, I believe you said.
Continuum Labs has made consistent monthly reports. I cannot tell you the detail of those reports, but they certainly can be made available to you.
Is there a written job description for what Casey Dixon does on a contract basis for the IDA?
Oh, I don't recall.
Was Casey Dixon now the person who is the steward of the public money and responsible for the continuum grant?
Casey Dixon, the person who is the steward.
What
do you mean by steward?
Let me rephrase the question. Is Casey Dixon the project administrator for the IDA on the continuum grant?
Yes.
So she's responsible for making sure that the public grant money is used appropriately, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to take a 5-minute break and we might be done pretty soon.
All right.
Okay, that concludes the questions that I have. Some of the other lawyers may have some questions for you to follow up.
I'll try to keep it brief. Some of these questions that Mr. Brooks asked, I think, might have been clarified in subsequent questions, but I'm going to ask them anyway because I thought one of your answers might have been confusing. You were asked if there were two separate boards, and I believe your response was no, there were not. Are there two separate boards, and we're talking about the EDC and the IDA with dual membership?
Yes.
And there has always been two separate boards, correct?
Yes, but some of the members of the EDC have been members of the IDA.
Common membership at some points, but
Two separate boards.
boards,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Do you know if the county manager is actually an employee of the EDA, or is he just charged statutorily with administrative duties?
He's charged with administrative duties.
You testified that you reviewed records that were provided by LifeSync in your truck. Why?
Because of my concern over those records being public records and the fact that they weren't that detailed. It was convenient and easy to do.
You have acknowledged viewing the records that are part of Exhibit 6, the deposition, correct?
Yes.
Did you see anything in those records when you reviewed them that caused you concern over expenses being spent inconsistent with the requirements of the agreement?
No.
Were the expenses that you viewed consistent with the draw schedule that had been approved by the IDA?
Yes.
Did you treat what you saw in Exhibit 6, C1 through 75 as confidential?
Yes,
Why is that?
because I believe it was confidential proprietary business information.
Okay. Do you consider marketing to be part of a business plan?
I do.
Did you view or possess anything that might have been responsive to the public records request made in Exhibits 1 and 2? Let me start that over. I think I confused myself. Did you view or possess any records other than what is found in Exhibit 6 that you believe were responsive to the request made in Exhibits 1 and 2?
I'm not certain about what Exhibit
Okay.
6 is.
Exhibit 6 is this. Exhibit 6 is the lengthy. Did you view, let me rephrase it. Did you view anything other than bank statements and progress reports
No.
that you believed would be responsive in any way to the two public records requests that are the subject of this suit?
No.
I think, Mr. Ralph, I think you may have misspoke in one of your questions. I just want to clear it up because I don't want there to be any confusion because it is the gist of this lawsuit. You asked specifically if all he looked at, I believe, was statements and checks that were identified in Exhibit 6. And I want to take it one step further. You also saw the progress
Yes,
reports that were identified in Exhibit 6 too, correct?
Yes.
Okay. There was a question that was asked, Mr. Lambert, that was phrased in a way to suggest that Joe Albritton was the recipient of a grant as chairman of the EDC. Did you ever see any evidence that Joe Albritton received a dime of
No.
this LifeSync money?
No.
Last question, with respect to the continuum assignment and modification, did LifeSync inform you in advance of the sale of assets to continue?
Yes.
Was that in writing?
Yes.
Was it in writing in advance of the sale, or did something come in writing later?
I'm pausing because I can't recollect the actual document, but I'm certain that it was done in advance.
That's all I have.
I had just one follow-up on that. If Joe Albritton didn't receive any money from the grant, why is he on the personal note guaranteeing the money? He's not getting any money from the grant.
He had every intention of becoming an owner of the company, but to my knowledge, it was never consummated.
But the personal note was consummated. So he'd still be responsible for the grant money even though he didn't get any money from the grant?
I think so.
Okay.
That's my opinion, but I believe it could be.
No questions?